The night was heavy with silence, and the wind whispered through the trees as Mama Nkechi paced around her dimly lit bedroom. She held her phone tightly, her fingers trembling slightly as she dialed the number of her pastor, Reverend Jonas. Her heart pounded in her chest, a mix of anxiety and anticipation boiling within her. "Pastor, please, I need you to come to my house," she whispered into the phone, glancing towards the door as if expecting someone to burst in. "Sister Nkechi, what is it? Is everything all right?" The pastor's voice came through, deep and concerned. She sighed heavily. "It's my marriage, Pastor. I need prayers. My love life is in trouble. I feel like the devil is attacking my home. Please, come and pray for me tonight. And Pastor, come alone." There was a moment of hesitation on the other end. Then finally, "All right, Sister Nkechi. I will be there soon. Stay strong." She ended the call and sat on the edge of the bed, a sly smile creeping across her lips. She knew exactly what she was doing. Her husband, Mr. Okonkwo, worked the night shift and was never home before 7 a.m. Tonight was no different. She had made sure the house was warm and dimly lit, and she had put on her most revealing outfit, a loose wrapper barely covering her thighs and a blouse that clung to her body. When Pastor Jonas arrived, she welcomed him with a smile that held a deeper meaning. The moment he stepped inside, she locked the door behind him. "Let us pray, Sister Nkechi," he said, reaching for his Bible. She walked closer, her voice low and sultry. "Pastor, before we pray, I need you to do something for me." He looked up, confused. "What is it, my sister?" She moved even closer, the scent of her perfume surrounding him. "Pastor, my body is in pain. I need you to massage me." The pastor stepped back, clearing his throat. "Sister Nkechi, this is not right. I came here to pray, not." She placed a hand on his chest, looking deep into his eyes. "Pastor, my husband doesn't know how to treat a woman. He doesn't satisfy me. You are more than a husband to me. You understand the needs of a woman. Please, help me." He gulped, his body stiffening. "This is a temptation, Sister Nkechi. I am a man of God." But her hands were already moving, tracing small circles on his shoulders. His body betrayed him, and before he could resist, she pulled him onto the bed. Hours passed, and the room was filled with forbidden whispers and the scent of sin. The pastor, who had come to offer prayers, had fallen into the deepest temptation of his life. Meanwhile, at the factory where Okonkwo worked, a sudden realization struck him. He had forgotten his torch at home. Without thinking twice, he grabbed his things and told his supervisor he needed to rush home. It was only midnight. He still had time to come back before anyone noticed. He rode his motorcycle quickly through the dark, empty streets, his mind only on his torch. As he reached his home, he noticed something strange. The lights in his bedroom were still on. His heart skipped a beat. He quietly unlocked the door and stepped inside, moving like a ghost. His ears picked up the faint murmur of voices. He followed the sound until he stood outside his bedroom door. His hand reached for the handle, and with one swift motion, he pushed it open. What he saw made his blood run cold. There, lying in his bed, wrapped in his blanket, was his wife and his pastor. For a moment, no one moved. The silence in the room was suffocating. Then Pastor Jonas jumped up, his eyes wide with fear. "Brother Okonkwo, this is not what it looks like." Nkechi pulled the blanket over herself, pretending to be shocked. "Honey, you're back early." Okonkwo's hands clenched into fists, his breathing heavy. "Not what it looks like. You are in my bed, with my wife. What explanation do you have for this?" Pastor Jonas stuttered, his face pale. I was just..." Before he could finish, Okonkwo lunged at him. A fist flew through the air, landing squarely on the pastor's jaw. He stumbled back, knocking over a lamp as he fell to the floor. You dare to sleep with my wife under my roof? Okonkwo roared, his voice shaking the walls. Nkechi, instead of begging for forgiveness, stood up, her wrapper slipping slightly. Okonkwo, you have no right to be angry. If you were a real man, would I need another? The words hit him harder than any punch. His eyes burned with rage and betrayal. His hands trembled as he reached for his belt. The pastor scrambled to his feet, trying to dodge as Okonkwo raised his belt high. Brother, please. Mercy! But Okonkwo saw nothing but red. The next few minutes were filled with cries and the sound of leather meeting skin. Pastor Jonas struggled, but he was no match for an enraged husband. Just as Okonkwo was about to land another blow, the sound of a knock echoed through the house. Open this door. Now, a deep voice commanded from outside. All three of them froze. Who could it be at this hour? Okonkwo hesitated for a moment, then stormed to the door. As he yanked it open, he found himself face to face with two uniformed police officers. Mr. Okonkwo, we received a report of a disturbance in your home. May we come in? One of the officers asked sternly. Okonkwo's mouth went dry. Who had called the police? He turned back to see Nkechi, who now wore a smirk on her face. Yes, officer, she said sweetly. I called. My husband is trying to kill a man of God. Okonkwo's eyes widened in shock. You did what? The officer stepped in and looked at the pastor, who was still cowering in the corner with his torn shirt. Sir, you need to come with us, one of the officers said, grabbing Okonkwo's wrist. No. You don't understand. He was in my bed. With my wife. But Nkechi's tears had already started flowing. Officer, he almost killed me too. Please, take him away. Okonkwo could not believe what was happening. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound, and now he was the one being dragged out of his own house. Pastor Jonas watched in silence, his face filled with shame. He knew he had fallen, but was this the end of it? As the officers led Okonkwo away, his mind raced. The betrayal burned like fire in his chest, but something else gnawed at him, how easily Nkechi had turned against him. Officer, please listen to me, he pleaded as they stepped outside into the cold night air. This is my house. That man, he defiled my marriage bed. How am I the one being arrested? The older officer exchanged a glance with his partner before sighing. Calm down, Mr. Okonkwo. We are only taking you in for questioning. Your wife claims she was assaulted, and we must follow protocol. Nkechi stood at the doorway, watching with arms folded. There was no fear in her eyes, only satisfaction. But just as the officers were about to shove Okonkwo into their van, another voice broke through the night. Wait! All heads turned to see Mama Chinyere, the village gossip, standing at the corner of the street with a group of neighbors behind her. She had been awakened by the commotion and had gathered an audience. Mama Nkechi, you think we don't know what you've been up to, she spat, marching forward. You think we don't see how you dress and flirt around like a woman without a husband? A murmur of agreement rose from the gathered crowd. Some nodded knowingly, others whispered to each other. Nkechi's face darkened. Stay out of my business, Chinyere, she snapped. But Mama Chinyere wasn't done. Officer, are you really taking this man away when he is the victim here? She asked, turning to the policeman. We all know the truth. Nkechi has been running around behind her husband's back for months. If you ask around, you'll hear the rumors. The officers hesitated, exchanging looks. Just then, another voice spoke up, this one weak and filled with shame. It's true, Pastor Jonas muttered, stepping forward. His clothes were still disheveled, and his face bore the marks of Okonkwo's fury. I have sinned. I was led into temptation. The silence that followed was heavy. The neighbors gasped, some shaking their heads, others whispering prayers. Okonkwo let out a dry laugh. Now you admit it. after my wife tried to have me arrested." The officers frowned, taking in the new information. One of them turned to Nkechi. "Ma'am, did you file a false report?" Nkechi's lips parted, but no words came. Seeing she was cornered, she suddenly burst into loud, wailing sobs. "I only did what any lonely woman would do. My husband ignores me. He is never home. But the damage was done." The people had seen her true colors, and the respect she once commanded in the village was gone. The officer sighed, releasing Okonkwo. "We will take no further action against you, sir. But as for Pastor Jonas," he turned to the trembling man of God, "you may have to answer to your church for this." The murmurs grew louder as some of the elders in the village stepped forward, shaking their heads in disappointment. And Nkechi! She stood there, no longer the queen of her home, but a woman exposed. Okonkwo took a deep breath, staring at the woman he had once loved. Then, without another word, he turned on his heel and walked away, leaving her to face the shame of her own making. As Okonkwo walked away, his fists still clenched at his sides, the cold wind of the night did little to cool the fire in his chest. He had been wronged, humiliated, and nearly thrown into jail because of the woman he had vowed to love and protect. His steps were heavy, his heart even heavier. The villagers murmured amongst themselves, some shaking their heads in pity, others in quiet amusement. Scandals like these were rare, but when they happened, they spread like wildfire. Mama Chinyere, never one to miss an opportunity to stoke the flames of gossip, turned toward Nkechi. "Now tell us, woman, what will you do? Your husband has left, your secret is out, and your so-called man of God stands disgraced before the village." Nkechi shot her a venomous glare, wiping the tears that clung to her cheeks. She knew her position in the community had crumbled in a single night. The wives who once envied her, the men who once admired her beauty, none would ever look at her the same way again. Pastor Jonas, still trembling from the ordeal, tried to straighten his torn shirt. He avoided the judging eyes around him, mumbling prayers under his breath. He had fallen from grace, and he knew it. The elders of the church would soon hear of this, and his reputation as a spiritual leader would be forever stained. But Nkechi was not one to accept defeat so easily. Taking a deep breath, she lifted her chin and steadied her voice. "I am still his wife," she declared, her voice ringing through the night. "He cannot simply walk away. I will fix this." The villagers scoffed. "Fix what?" Mama Chinyere spat. "You invited another man into your husband's bed, and now you think you can just patch things up?" But Nkechi ignored her. Without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed back inside the house, slamming the door behind her. Meanwhile, Okonkwo walked through the empty streets, his mind swirling with thoughts. He could not go back home, not yet. He needed time, space, and most of all, a plan. He had loved Nkechi once, but love alone could not erase betrayal. Would he return to the house and pretend nothing happened? Would he cast her out, forcing her to face the world alone? Or was there another path, one he had not yet considered? As he walked past the marketplace, he felt a hand grab his wrist. He turned sharply, ready for another confrontation, but instead, he found himself staring into the wise, wrinkled face of Baba Jide, the village healer. "You walk with the weight of the world on your shoulders, my son," the old man said, his voice like the rustling of ancient leaves. Okonkwo sighed. "You have heard what happened, Baba. The whole village knows." Baba Jide nodded slowly, studying him. "Come with me, child. There is something you must see." Curious, and with nothing left to lose, Okonkwo followed the old man through the winding paths of the village. They walked in silence until they reached a small hut at the edge of the river. The air smelled of burning herbs, and the sound of distant drums echoed through the trees. Inside, the room was dimly lit, the walls lined with dried roots and sacred symbols. Baba Jide gestured for Okonkwo to sit. "Tell me," the healer said, his eyes peering deep into Okonkwo's soul. Do you wish to seek revenge, or do you wish to seek truth? Okonkwo frowned. Truth. What truth? I saw it with my own eyes. My wife and my pastor. His voice cracked with emotion. Baba Jide placed a small clay bowl in front of him, filled with dark, murky water. Not everything seen with the eyes is the truth. There are forces at play here, child. Forces you do not yet understand. Okonkwo stiffened. What do you mean? The old man leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. Do you truly believe Nkechi acted alone? Or do you think something else guided her hand? A chill ran down Okonkwo's spine. He thought of the strange way Nkechi had smirked when she called the police, how she had spoken without fear even when she was caught. He remembered the way the air had felt heavy in the house that night, like something unseen had been watching. You mean she was bewitched? He asked, his voice barely audible. Baba Jide simply smiled, stirring the water in the bowl. The liquid swirled, and for a brief moment, Okonkwo thought he saw something move beneath its surface, something dark, something with watching eyes. His breath hitched. What is this? He whispered. Baba Jide leaned back. That, my son, is the real question. Okonkwo felt his heart begin to race. Had he been blind to something far more sinister? And if so, what would he do next?